Today is an impressive sunny day in London, so I think it's a really great day to talk about Pi. We have like lots to cover. I prepare like a kind of like this full course, full guide through Pi Agent. If we finish this together, we are going to be in a really great state to use Pi and adapt Pi for whatever need that you have, because that's one of the best qualities that Pi has. It is really hackable and you can tweak it for your own needs. So let's jump straight to it. First, like what Pi is and what is not. So Pi is pretty minimal. It's like when you take like Cloud Code or other agent and you strip out everything else and you just keep the core. Even the system prompt of Pi is pretty minimal. And I create a little extension here that I call system prompt. I created this command here that just like shows the current system prompt that we have loaded. And you can see that it's really, really minimal. Like you are an expert coding assistant, that's it. That's just like one sentence to describe what Pi is. The available tools that Pi has, and it's basically 4 tools. It's really minimalist. So you can read, edit, and write files, and execute bash commands. Why is that? Well, those code agents, they are already like trained especially during post-training, when you have this reinforcement learning feedback, when users go through the whole process of editing, fixing bugs, editing source files. So all that is already inside of the learning of the model. So it doesn't make sense to increase our context window with tons of tokens. If we compare the size of the system prompts with other tools like Cloud Code, it's like orders of magnitude less than what we have at Pi. There's no MCP support by default. MCPs are really interesting when you have a specific needs. For instance, when you want to communicate your agent with a browser, for instance, that's really interesting to use MCP. But MCP burns a lot of context window. You can go up to 10K tokens, 10,000 tokens per server that you add as an MCP server. And so imagine that if you have like 5 to 10 MCP servers there configured, you're going to use half of your context window only for MCP definitions. So I think it's not interesting to use that much, only when you have a specific need. And if you really want to use that, then you can use something like Pi MCP adapter or MCP porter. And those tools will allow you to connect through Pi to MCP or rapid MCP as CLI2 like PMCP porter. And another option, instead of using MCP, you can use that as a skill, which is not more than a CLI2 in some instruction how to use that CLI2. So there is no sub-agents in Pi. So if you want to run Pi and spawn many sub-agents, just tell Pi to start other Pi instances if you want to. And one interesting aspect of sub-agents is that when you use a sub-agent, at least on the context that I have been using in Cloud Code, for instance, is generally because you didn't plan ahead. So for instance, you're going to spawn a sub-agent to check some documentation for the development that your agent are doing. But you don't need to do that, because if you plan ahead and you know where the documentation is, you just point there before, and then the agent that you already have will just like go through that and read the documentation. You don't need a sub-agent. Or you can just build your own support for sub-agents. You can ask Pi to do that, or install a package. There are lots of packages too. I'm going to cover that later as well. There's no permission blocks neither. So you don't need to use all the time Claude skip dangerously permissions anymore. Pi is YOLO by default. Why? Because if you need security restrictions, it's not that, flow of, hey, I need to run some commands, please allow it or not. And that running back and forth, that's not the best way to design security around your Pi agent. There's many other ways to do that, like using sandboxes, using some other guards that you can use. So if you want security, you can do that through some extensions as well. There's no plan mode or to-do mode. You can do that by actually creating your plan.md file or whatever name you want to use for your plan, or a to-do MD file, markdown file. And I do that, for instance, all the time. I don't feel the need to have a plan or a to-do as an extension. Or if you want to use it, you can create your own as well. And there is no background bash. Pi has like this main thread, it runs everything as in that thread, and if you want to spawn other comments inside bash, you can use tmux, for instance. Because inside Pi you can say, hey, you are allowed to use tmux to spawn other sessions, use it while you're doing this task, while you're running the command, and you basically create a tmux session, add the bash there, and use tmux. That's the beauty of using bash in Unix systems, because everything is a file, everything is a command that runs once and does some task really, really well. So it's just a matter of depending on that power, using that power in your favor. And it's really great also for observability, because if you run something in a background bash and you want to monitor what that specific command is doing, you're going to have to develop lots of monitoring around that. When you use tmux, it's just a matter of connecting, attaching to that specific tmux session, and you can have like the full terminal and explore what's happening there. And of course, if you are not happy with that, you can also like extend Pi again and have something on your own taste. Okay, so let's start and go for the installation. So to install, it's really simple. You just have to copy this command here. You can go, by the way, in pi.dev and copy the command here too. There you go. It installed Pi. To run it, you just type Pi. So when you're presented to Pi the first time, you're going to see the version. You can type Ctrl-O to see more commands that Pi has. More commands here. And there's lots of commands that we're going to cover. Once you have Pi installed, the first thing that I generally do is to set up my providers. So how I'm going to access the large language models that I have access to. First difference between Pi and Cloud Code and Codex is that you are free to choose. You are not entangled to a specific provider like OpenAI or Anthropic. To log into your provider, you just have to go execute Pi and type login. I generally use my ChatGPT Plus and Pro account. Select here, it will open the browser. When you go back to that flow, you're going to see here that your subscription is configured. And from now on, you'll be able to use the ChatGPT model using your Codex subscription. So the other way is to, instead of using your subscription, you can use an API key of any provider that you want. One really great way to do that is using OpenRouter. And to do that, you have to create an account in OpenRouter. So just openrouter.ai. And if you go for credits, you can add a bit of credits here, like $10 to start, for instance. Then you go to API keys and then create a new API key for you. When you create an API key, it's going to generate it. You can copy the key and then export it as OpenRouter API key, and here you type your token. Once you do that, it's going to register this environment variable in your environment, and you'll be able to access OpenRouter. Another option is to edit this file, and we are going to cover more of all the directories that we have in Pi installations for configuring it. But if you go to Authentication, you see here the providers that we already configured. So we see the OpenAI Codex. I already have my OpenRouter key as well. And once you have OpenRouter configured, now you can go back to Pi, use the model command that I use all the time, and type OpenRouter. You see they have like more than 200 models available for you to use. And let's say that I want to use GLM 5.1, and I'm going with that. You see on the status here that now we have OpenRouter as a provider with the GLM 5.1 model, and we can use it for whatever you want. If you want to go back to GPT, you just type GPT 5.5, for instance. Select the OpenAI Codex one, that's your subscription, and you're now in Codex land. In this way, you can combine different models in any way you want. You can start with one model, switch for the other, have like sessions starting with one model, then you can fork the session, branch out, and then continue with another model. It's really powerful and really, you can feel the freedom of using any model that you want. There's another important point here. You can also use local models, and it's going to start happening more and more, especially now that we have open source models that can run locally and for AI coding. So to use a local model, you just go to pyagentmodels.json, and you can use Ollama, for instance, to run your model in some specific point, like the default one in Ollama. You specify the model that you want, the context window of that, and you're going to have that model also supported in Py. So it's kind of like this Swiss Army knife of models. You can use whatever model you want. There's a lots of keystrokes and commands that exist in Py, and those are kind of the ones that I use most. Important one is how to exit Py. So if you are running Py, you type Ctrl+C, and just exit it. Or if there is anything running in the, for instance, like some model running, and you want to cancel, you can just like type Ctrl+C, and that will interrupt the model. Another keystroke that's handy is Shift-Enter. So if you're typing, for instance, like typing a large plan here, and I want more lines, I can just type Shift-Enter, and it will not send the prompt, but will allow you to add more lines to your prompt. And also if you type it something and you want to clean it up, you just like type Ctrl+C, that will clean that the whole prompt for you. A double ask is, it will bring you to the tree mode, which we're going to discuss next. So it's the same thing as typing tree. And you're going to see that there is like lots of other keystrokes. I cover like a bit how to access the documentation of Py, so you can check all the other keystrokes that we have there. So everything that you configure in Py or install is going to be inside of this home.py/agent folder. All the extensions, skills, prompts, themes, sessions, models, or JSON or settings JSON that you have for Py are going to be there. If you want to specify or overwrite the system prompt globally in your computer, you can also use the system.md there, and that will be overwriting the default system prompt that comes with Py. But if you want a specific agents.md, for instance, for your project, you can add that in the root folder of your project, or inside root.py agents.md, for instance. Okay, let's cover now a pretty important topic, which is sessions. In Py, every message that you exchange between you and your agent are going to be stored in this PyAgent sessions. So if we go inside .pyagent sessions, we're going to have one folder per each project, or the folder that you just started a Py session. And if we enter inside one of those folders, we're going to see a bunch of JSON-L files. And if we check the content of one of those files, you're going to see just basic JSON-L file, and every single operation that we did during the session, even like the model changes, are going to be available in this session file. So it's really convenient, because if you want to inspect these sessions later through some other tool that you have, you can do that just by accessing those files. It's pretty transparent. So just like in ChatGPT, when you have this like main thread of chat, and you can branch out, and you can keep like the conversation on the original branch and start adding new messages on the new branch, you can do exactly the same thing in Py. So for instance, if I start a new Py session here, and I type tree, and tree is the main navigation command that you're going to have. If we go back and add some messages like hey, list the files in this folder. So it listed the files, and if I type tree, now I'm going to see the message that I entered before. So let's say that I want to branch out from this message here. So I basically go there, type enter, and it will ask me to summarize or not that branch. So I don't want summary. So let's see, let's list only the folders. And now if we type tree, we actually have a tree. So that's a really powerful feature because you can create like these complex trees or exploring some specific details of your code base or some tasks that you want, some experiments that you want to have, and select what kind of context that you want to go with. Another important command is fork. And with that, we are going to create a completely new session from a previous user message. We only had those two messages, so I can start with this one, for instance. It's going to be a completely new session. That's why we don't have like any comments from the previous session that we had before. And you might be asking, okay, how I go back to that? How can I see all the sessions? There's two ways to do that. One is pi minus c will basically continue your last session. And you see here that's exactly the session that we started before. You can use pi minus r that will restore a specific session that you can select. So here you have like all the sessions that we have so far in this folder. And this is really, really cool because we can just like keeping adding sessions, keeping starting pi, but we can go back to that. I have like sessions here from 6 days ago, and it's okay. I can just like go back to that, and I have exactly the session that I kept when I left, and I'm just restoring for it. Another cool command is share. And if you have the GitHub CLI configured, that will create a secret gist that you can share with your peers, your colleagues, or whoever are like working in your project. And another one is export. So if you type export, the session will be exported to this file here, to just like a HTML file. So if you go ahead and open this file, you're going to see the tree, like the message that we had before pointed, and also how all the other messages or everything that is inside your context. If you are in the middle of a session and you want to start a new one, you just type new, that will start a completely fresh session. And if you are in a session and you want to know how much that costs and how much tokens were consumed, you can type session, and that will give you all the stats that you want to know about your session, like a number of tokens, use. In this case, I consumed like more than 700,000 tokens, and costs us 48 cents for me. So that's it. Sessions are pretty important, easy to navigate with those commands like new, tree, fork, share, export, and session to know the stats, and pi minus c, pi minus r if you want to continue restoring the session. Context engineering is one of the main topics, not only in Pi, but in any agent that you use, because that's how you can select what you are going to add to your context window, provide tools for your agents to do a great job. Pi has some ways to do context engineering, and the first one is through agents.md, and that's not only for Pi, but for other agents as well. It's basically where you put everything related to tech guidelines, important source files, or documentations that you want to bring to the agent, like architecture or design decisions that you have. It's also the place where you can instruct the agent on which tools he can use to run tasks or to run the app by itself. You can place agents.md in the root of your project folder or inside this subfolder .py. It's equivalent, it's the same thing. And if you want that agents.md to be applied for all the sessions that you have, you can also put that in your home Pi agent folder. It's the same is valid for the system and independent system and other files that you can have that applied globally in your system. And just to give an example of how an agents.md file can look like, let's open the one that is used in Pi itself. So here you can see the guidelines for the agent. So covering code quality, the comments that you can run to test Pi, how to do PRs, and how to test in interactive modes using tmux and other comments. So it's really like a way to guide your agent for the best practices on how to develop your project. Another important file is system.md. And if you use that inside of your folder or inside of PyAgent systemd, you're going to completely replace the original system prompt of Py. That's really great because it's really flexible. You can also call that through the system prompt argument in Py. And here I'm just like saying, hey, you are a code reviewer, and I'm providing tools that are only read tools. There's no write permission here. So let's see how it goes. So if I ask it, okay, create a Python script with hello world, if we check the output of this agent, we'll see that it's saying that the user asked it for creating a script, but it can't do it. It's only a reviewer of code and doesn't have like any tools to write. So this concept of like writing system prompts is pretty useful for when you want to create an agent with some personality or some specific needs that you need. And another file that's related with system.md is append system.md. That guy will not overwrite completely the original system prompt, but will append to it. Just like for the system prompt, we also have a CLI argument here that we can pass through Py, so it will append to the system prompt whatever instruction that you have. So here I'm telling the agent to create unit tests and iterate on implementing them until they pass. So if I tell it, okay, create a script to calculate the Fibonacci sequence, invite. So note it created like a test Fibonacci first, and then it wrote the script. It ran the Python test and it passed. Compaction is also available on Py. It has its own auto-compact feature, but you can force it through /compact. And it's important to remember that compaction is lossy operation, so you cannot reconstruct a session from the compacted version of it, but you can access all the session history that you had before, just access the session JSON-L file. So skills are also available in Py, and they are basically capability packages. So it's a description of what the tool does and the CLI tools attached to it. And you can define that as markdown files and save them inside of PyAgent skills with some name that you prefer. And it's basically the same way that you create a skill for Cloud Code or Codex. Prompt templates are also useful, especially when you have like some prompts that you use often and you want to reuse them. So you basically create them as markdown files inside of PyAgent prompts. And they have this support for argument, and you can use the argument inside of the markdown, just like a template. So if we load that in Py, we are going to have the review prompt template available. And if we call it, we can call it like review and review in test coverage, for instance. And test coverage is going to be inserted in the focus of the template. Extensions that you have loaded and you create in Py can also change the context dynamically. So that's an important aspect while you're considering create your own extension. And one important tip is to have your skills and prompts also under version control, so you can share easily between your peers. All right, so let's talk about extensions. And extensions are pretty core to Py because that's how you can extend its main features and add any kind of functionality that you want. So with extensions, you can create your own tools, your own commands, shortcuts, events, compaction strategies. So everything that you want to tweak in Py, you can do through extensions. So here we have like some example of how to use the extension API to create an extension. So we can react to events. Like here, we are reacting to the session start and changing the UI to notify some message to the user. If you want to just like test your extension, a cool tip here is to use -E to just load the extension in the folder that you have. You don't have to copy that to the PyAgent extensions folder. And here you see that we got the session started event and it displays session started. So let's go back to our example here. In this line, we are reacting to the tool call. So every time a tool is going to be called, we check if this tool name is a bash, and then if it includes some dangerous comment, like it's just trying to remove some file or some folder. And then we block that for our user. So if I run Pi now with the extension and I ask it to remove some folder, so I believe there is a foo folder here. So let's ask it to remove the foo folder. So you can see it was blocked. So that's one possible way for you to add safeguards in the comments that you run in your agent. And you can also define your own tools through the extension API. Like in this case here, we are just defining a pretty simple greet tool that you just like greet whatever name that we give to the agent. If you run the extension inside of Pi, and now it has the greet tool, we can say, hey, Bob is here. So note that the agent uses the greet tool and said, hello, Bob. So this is really simple, but you can extend that and create any kind of tool and give it programmatically to your agent. And we are defining another simple tool here that's called weather, and it will basically call the weather in URL and encoding the city that I give as an argument, because we can have like arguments like parameters to the tool, and it will return the weather for some given city. If you run the extension and ask for the agent, what's the weather in London? It used the weather tool and gave us the weather in London, which is kind of accurate. It's about to rain again. And one of the cool things about Pi is that because all the documentation is made for agents too, because one of the core features is to let Pi build its own extensions when you ask it to do. The documentation is really well written and there is lots of examples. So if we enter in the PyMono repo, go to packages and then coding agent and examples and extensions, you're going to see lots of examples here for you to tweak and get inspiration to create your own. So I really recommend checking the extension examples and to have an idea what is possible to do with extensions in Pi. A quick note here, if you created a pretty cool extension and you want to package that, you can package it as an npm package or as a git repo, and that will allow you to install the extension in whatever Pi session that you have. Since that we are talking about Pi packages, it's important to know how to install them. And to install, you install from npm or from some git repo. So here I'm just like trying to install PyDoom, and it's just like Pi install in the name of the repository that we have. So if we run Pi now, and we see that there is this PyDoom extension loaded, and that extension exposes this Doom command. So if we run, you see that we have Doom here, which is pretty useful. You can also list the packages you have. You can also remove some packages if you want to, and the package should not be available anymore. And you can also update and config some specific package if it provides configuration. Pi packages will be installed in the git subfolder inside of PyAgent or as a global npm. But you can also install the package inside of your local .py subfolder using the -l argument. Pi can be customized not only by the extension, but the look and feel can be tweaked a bit too. And we have themes for that. The themes are stored in PyAgent themes, and we can access them by /settings. So if you run Pi and go for settings, and if you go down here in theme, you can see that we have the dark theme selected, and we can select between the other themes that they have, which is only light. But we can create our own theme if you want. Create a matrix inspired theme for Pi. While it's creating, it's interesting to see here how it's accessing the documentation that it has about themes, and that we are going to use that to create its own theme. Okay, so it finished creating the theme. So let's see if it's in settings here now. So if you go to theme, matrix green, yeah, that looks pretty green and pretty matrix. So until now, we only used Pi in interactive mode, but we can use Pi in other ways too. One way is to use as a print, and that is pretty interesting to use when you want to combine that with other bash commands. To use the print mode, you just use the -p argument, and you provide the prompt that you want. Just because I'm super creative, let's ask for what kind of files are in this folder. The files in this folder. Pretty convenient because then you can pipe it. For instance, if you have an error file or some log that you want to inspect, and then you can pipe it to Pi and ask to interpret the result of that log. Another way to interact with Pi is to use the JSON event stream mode. And to output all the sessions that you have as JSON lines to the standard output. And to access the JSON event stream, you just specify the mode as JSON and pass the prompt you want. And you're going to see the stream of JSON that the agents is providing for us. And together with JSON event streams, RPC is another possibility for you if you want to integrate Pi in a non-Node.js app. I have an example how to do that. So let's say that I want to communicate a Python script with Pi. So here I'm running Pi as a sub-process in the RPC mode. And I'm sending whatever prompt I want to the standard input. And in this case, I'm just saying hello as a message. And I'm then iterating through the message that I get back from the standard output. So if you run this script, you're sending hello, and we are streaming back the output. And the last way to interact with Pi is through its SDK. And that's a pretty cool and powerful way, because we can really create your own Pi if you want from scratch, just by using the functions and classes that are exported by Pi. So here I have like a really simple example that is just like creating an agent session and writing some prompt to it and getting back the result. So if you run the script, we are going to have the files listed because I asked it again to list the files, and also the JSON output that we had, the user message, the assistant messages, and all. So with RPC, with JSON stream, with print mode, with the SDK, you can really hack your way into Pi. To help you on that, I really recommend again to check the documentation, especially the docs in the coding agent and the examples, because you have all the docs for the SDK, for the extensions, and all the examples that use both. So really recommend to check those and play with them. Because it's an open source project, Pi is attracting lots of developers, and we already have like different versions of Pi, other flavors, and set up scripts that make your life easier when you start with Pi. I just discovered Lazy Pi. So if you access that in lazypi.org, I'll leave the links in the description. So when you run Lazy Pi, it's going to set up lots of Pi packages that will add some support for you for sub-agents, for MCP, and other interesting extensions that you might need. So it's a really great way to start if you don't want to start using Pi from scratch. Another interesting project is OhmyPi, and it's a fork of Pi with lots of tools implemented in Rust for efficiency, and really interesting. Like it's expanding too. It's really recommend you to check it out. The community is also importing Pi to other languages. So Pi Agent Rust is a part of Pi to Rust. And I just started this project called Modex, which is this AI coding harness implemented in the Mojo programming language, and grab some inspiration from Pi too. I just started, so if you want to check it out and follow along, it's available here, and I will link in the description. We did it. I think we covered it. I think that's kind of like gives you an idea of like what Pi is about, and what you can do with it, how you can explore the features it has, how you can extend, how you can hack Pi for your own necessity. If you like this format here, like it's kind of content and where we go deep in some tech and demystify AI, please subscribe, because I'm going to publish more and more. And leave your comment if you have like any topic that you want me to cover more in a future video. So that's it. I hope you enjoy it, and see you in next one. Bye.